Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Moor Insights and Strategy Hot Desk Podcast. I'm Melody Brue. I am joined today by Robert Kramer, our VP and Principal Analyst of ERP and Enterprise Data, and Jason Andersen, VP and Principal Analyst of DevOps and Application Platforms. Hello, both of you.
Hey.
So on this show, we talk about all of the tools, trends, and trajectories in so many things now. We keep adding things. So people tech, marketing technologies, enterprise apps, ERP, CRM, now DevOps, since we've had Jason join us many times. And of course, the glue that holds everything together, the data. So we are talking today about several different events that have happened within the last couple of weeks. ServiceNow, Microsoft Build, IBM Think, Salesforce Connection, Zoom Perspectives, and Canva Create. So many things. Not all of us were at all of them. Some of us were live at some, virtual at some. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of a roundtable today, similar to actually, if anybody who's watching has seen Pat Moorhead and Daniel Newman do the 6-5, where they do 6 topics, 5 minutes each. We're kind of going to get it going like that. So we are going to start with ServiceNow, and I'm going to actually kick that to Jason. We all collaborated on a Forbes article, which is linked in the show notes. But I'm going to kick that off to Jason to talk about what ServiceNow has going on and what they announced.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mel. I think ServiceNow is really trying to kind of break out from their historical place of significance, right? Which has been around the IT and IT kind of support, or even customer support for frontline business as well area. And they have a lot of pieces, and they were able to really demonstrate some pretty powerful things about why they are a capable platform for going beyond just the kind of scope of what they're historically known for. I think, the introduction of development and integration tools, the workflow capabilities, and then, of course, a pretty big, healthy dose of generative AI are all kind of technology pieces that came together. But it wasn't just about the technology bits, because they also started to kind of color outside the lines a bit in terms of the solution space. And I think they were doing some stuff with manufacturing in particular, right? Robert, what do you think?
Absolutely. And I'll touch base on that one in just a minute. But yeah, they did hit on some really strong topics outside of the ERP systems, which was manufacturing and linking those processes together. But Mel, why don't you jump in? I think you were going to touch on this next.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, in general, what they're aiming to be is sort of the platform of platforms, and really being kind of the front end of any enterprise application. So I think, we can see this like in the Forbes article. I gave a couple of examples of, how this can kind of, you could see this happening in like a, say, Workday kind of situation, where ServiceNow can kind of be that top layer, where that's sort of the entry point into a Workday. And I think that that's really kind of their goal, is where they will be that sort of front end or top layer to any enterprise app. And I think it's just a matter of whether they can connect that data, but it certainly makes for, a good user experience if that data, all of those different various points of those data points can be connected. I think that they have a really good chance of kind of breaking down or bridging those silos throughout the whole business and bringing all that data in together, so that, in that example of, say, HR, it's not hopping from one thing to the other to get the answers or, the workflows that you need.
Right. Yeah. I think that what was impressive about it is that there have been attempts to kind of do these breakthrough types of break down the silo types technologies. I mean, if you saw a lot of that, like service-oriented architecture, you saw ERP systems attempt to do this, a few years ago as well. And I think the two things that are standout in terms of what makes this different was, the first is the more workflow centric approach to it, which is really kind of the actual human work that glues all this together. And then the second part really is what I would call a very practical approach to Gen AI, because it wasn't, AI for the sake of AI, like draw me a picture of a purple unicorn eating an ice cream cone. It was here's how AI specifically tuned models can actually solve a specific problem you're trying to do. That's a common business problem, not some sort of more consumer oriented type of magic show or anything like that.
Right. Well, I think that you hit on some points that were pretty great with the silos. So the goal is companies have all these processes, but their main application is still the ERP. And they focused on data and AI for this platform. But how do you bring all these processes together to work with the ERP systems? Like you said, the silos. And I think that ServiceNow's new platform will help with that, because the data is still going to sit in the ERP systems, and these processes are still going on, and bringing it all together is super important. So they released a new product, which is the manufacturing commercial operations product, which you talked about briefly, but it's in the article as well. But it helps the manufacturers manage a lot of these processes that deal with operations, and AI is helping that. So the collaboration of these processes within ServiceNow will help reduce the technology stack. I think in the end, all these companies are trying to do that because these technology stacks are large. And as we go through the companies we're talking about today, we'll see that they're actually strengthening their ecosystems with partnering with their competitors to bring best practices and better products to the customer, and to help reduce that overall stack in the end. So should we touch on Microsoft next, or?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. So, I think the same theme is going on at Microsoft as well with AI and data. This is more of a developer conference, and to give more tools with AI to actually build better applications, that are focused a lot on the ecosystem as well. They have a very strong data fabrics product that they enhance with more tools for the developers, better productivity, performance as well. They integrated more features for their Copilot, and more things from their .NET libraries as well. But one of their new capabilities is focused a lot on these connectors to really mesh these silos that we just talked about together as well. So I'll turn it back over to you guys for that.
Yeah, so for me, the focus for Build for me was really on kind of the collaboration side of things, and of course there was so much talk about Copilot, but where Copilot, I think, in terms of collaboration and modern work, where we saw just so much progress is on the Copilot Plus and the AI PCs. And I think also the Copilot for Teams. And so Copilot Teams, which is different than Copilot for Teams. So instead of having an individual Copilot, you have a Copilot for Teams, that Copilot that can work across teams, which I think for Microsoft is a little bit confusing, because it's not necessary. It does work within Teams, meaning like within the collaboration platform. But this, I think what's interesting for me here is that this sort of team Copilot starts to touch on what people have been talking about as sort of an AI agent, where we're going from Copilot to agent, where it's almost like a project manager that can start to assign tasks, but then also complete tasks on behalf of the group. And I wouldn't necessarily call it an agent yet, but I think it's just sort of that one step closer to creating this sort of AI agent within a team environment. I think we could go on forever about the AI PC, but I have to say, as a Mac user, it made me question my life.
Me too.
I'm like, oh my goodness. I feel like, between like the Snapdragon announcement, battery life, the AI compute at the edge, the number of OEM partners, the number of price points, Copilot built in, accessible to all of 365. It just like I was like, I might have to switch. I think this is just, kind of the start of this. And, they did do a comparison to speed, battery life, and everything to Apple products on the stage during one of the keynotes. And again, made me question my loyalty to my Mac products, but pretty impressive stuff.
Let me kind of take in a bit of a different direction. Is on the developer side, you also had a lot of announcements, and I think a lot of people forget that the tool sets Microsoft put out are consistently at the top of the list in terms of developer tools used. And while these events were going on, actually a friend of mine who's the CPO of a SaaS firm up here in New England was talking to me about it, Copilot specifically. And he had mentioned that it was compelling enough to his developers that they were paying for it out of pocket. And once that started to get out in the company, it coincidentally, it had turned out that one of the members of the board of the company was a fan of Copilot from another company he advises, and they just started reimbursing everybody. If you think about that kind of shadow IT notion, that kind of is that starting to emerge with AI tools in the developer space, given that everybody has these tool sets now, it's sort of an interesting idea. But the other thing that sticks out to me is also how Microsoft is really kind of working cooperatively with GitHub, and how that's going pretty well, where they're really just kind of staying focused on what they do best, and they're trying to bring out the best in each other, as opposed to, sometimes in an acquisition, it kind of gets blurry or there's some sort of overreach. And you don't necessarily see that happening with what's coming with the announcements. It seems what they're trying to do is keep Git independent, but also be an anchor tenant with it. And I think some of the announcements, especially around their Git's new development tool set, which is Copilot driven, is pretty powerful. It's not out yet, but certainly something that's a pretty powerful looking tool set and pretty interesting. Want to move on to IBM, maybe IBM Think, talk about that for a second.
Yeah, one thing I want to add, I actually just went to unmute myself and I removed myself for a second. Love the live format. You talked about people who were paying for Copilot on their own. So Microsoft just released their most recent work trend index. And one of the biggest things that stood out to me was the number of people who are bringing their own AI tools to work. They call it BYOAI.
Oh,
So
wow.
that is a massive trend. I'm working on a piece on that. That will come soon. So,
cool. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
So let's move on to IBM Think. You were there in person, correct?
I was at IBM Think. Clearly yet another AI show in terms of message. But what I'd say is that IBM's taking a very kind of IBM-like stance on it, right? And what I mean by that is they're kind of staying in line with their own approach to the market, which is around enterprise customers who demand and require what I'll call a hybrid environment, or environment that is heterogeneous, right? I think what they did extraordinarily well in the show was to actually go a couple steps beyond some of their recent announcements, notably the announcements that were made at Red Hat Summit. They took a level of depth and understanding as to what the Granite models were and why they were useful, which is IBM essentially outsourced 18 models, LLMs, into the market on an Apache license, which is a very permissive, easy to get license. They also put a set of tools out there around training and what they call teaching the models. Those are also open source, and they're trying to encourage people to actually contribute their code from those into the wild. So they're, obviously pushing a big thing around OpenAI, not OpenAI, the company, but OpenAI, the idea. And it was a pretty powerful show. The other thing that was interesting was they really kind of amped up the diversity in terms of not only who was speaking, but the types of companies they were talking about. So they're definitely trying to kind of, I'd say, change their perception a little bit in terms of the market. I'd also say very interestingly that it was it was a good show in terms of how they set it up, how they organized it. I thought they did a really nice job in terms of not burning people out and subjecting them to 900 PowerPoint slides throughout the day. It was well crafted. So, and they had a lot of access to and a lot of presentations from the senior leadership there to give. And I think they gave a perspective that was a little different than the pure tech show. So it was a good show.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd say good stuff. The closing thought on it is just, I did release a couple videos on it last week, but there's another piece coming out. There was a piece about Red Hat Summit that got launched this week, but that I wrote. But now there's a follow up to Think that'll probably be out early next week. So stay tuned for more, in-depth research on that particular topic.
Cool. Looking forward to that. I didn't see a ton. I was at several different events actually in person last week. One thing that I've noticed recently from IBM is their ability to demonstrate use cases in a way that they haven't done in the past couple of years, where I think it allows people to have a better understanding of what IBM is doing and how. And one example is the IBM Consulting Microsoft partnership, where they're actually doing like experiential like centers where you can go and have like kind of hands-on experience of the types of things that they're doing together. And I think that really helps people kind of wrap their brains around the types of things, even if that solution isn't entirely for your company or the solution that you need. It gives you that sort of hands-on, even something, as like tangential as their master's experience that we covered. When you can show it show something as, sort of like complicated, some very, very complicated tech in a way that really makes sense to anybody. And, backing that up with the fact that all purchasing decision makers aren't necessarily IT buyers anymore.
Right.
These kind of experiences that IBM is bringing to the market, I think helps to explain what they do in a way that they haven't done in the past couple of years. And I think it's really smart. So
yeah, just to follow up on that thread, one thing I thought they did that was pretty powerful in terms of the AI aspect was I went to a session with Adobe, who are using the Granite models for some of their underlying products. They're embedding them. And their entire discussion was about, web content and marketing. It had nothing to do with, your traditional IBM, long-standing stuff. It was very much, hey, this is an Adobe presentation. This is how we're partnering with IBM to make marketing and in particular web content management a lot better. And to your point, I thought it was an excellent presentation from that respect. I think the other thing that is interesting, and I did get some feedback from some partners at IBM about this, is that if you look at what IBM is doing, I think one of the reasons they've empowered themselves to do that is by putting spotlights on certain things. But those things aren't like the main drivers of their financial performance. Let's, to be honest, if you look at like their, their work that they're doing in AI or the work they're doing with Red Hat and, those types of things, that doesn't even represent half their revenue. Probably it's probably might not even represent a quarter of their revenue, but that's all they seem to be talking about. And they're really kind of honing in on those types of use cases. Whereas I think in the past, I worked at IBM a long time ago, and even relatively short history past, they were always compelled to talk about the whole business all the time, to represent the entire business. And I think that really confused people at times in terms of what their message was. And it was just too many priorities, right? So they really couldn't get the wood behind any arrow. So I agree with you, Mel. I think they've kind of gotten out of their own way a little bit in that regard. But when you go to a show like Think, the first day is partner day, the second day is analyst day, then there's the day for everybody else. Some partners aren't thrilled about that, right? Because they're actually out there servicing parts of the business that IBM isn't focused on right now from a marketing perspective. Right? Their salespeople are still out selling the stuff, but you get my point. So there is this kind of push-pull where IBM has one direction and not all stakeholders are thrilled about it. But I actually think in the grand scheme of things, it does help. Those partners are going to have to figure out how to market on their own and sell on their own, right?
Well, From my perspective, I think they're making a repositioning themselves around Watson X. The position with AI and data, and like what Mel said with the experimental solutions, it's more towards a client-centric solution. Their strategies focuses on building trust. I think you guys probably see that with their relationships that they're building, their partnerships with Adobe, also with AWS and Salesforce. But I actually had a talk with them recently, and they really were strong about that. About these partnerships and how they want to make the customers more, more part of the equation versus, that their competitors are competitors and they can't partner with these companies, and they're having a better product with these joint partnerships. But what you mentioned, the Red Hat openness, Jason, they focused a lot on that and the emphasis around a collaborative approach, and the key with the products like the Instruct Lab. You probably know a little bit more about that than myself, but the Red Hat partnership is really powering that, and how that's really a really big part of their next generation. Because like Mel, you were saying that they were more of a close-knit company, but their products now are more open, and they're trying to make a more simplistic technology stack because it's complicated. And so how do they get it where it's not as complicated?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Well, you mentioned Salesforce, and that's our next topic. And you're going to lead that one because you attended Salesforce Connections virtually, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the IBM partnerships is with Salesforce. And Salesforce released their new zero copy partner network, which basically leaves the data where it is, and instead of copying it over. And data is obviously a huge topic, but IBM is one of the partners in that network. But this was a conference that focused specifically on data and AI again, and focused on unifying the business data and the customer data to really help marketers and merchants deliver more of a personalized approach and help them give the content that they need from the data that's available. And the zero copy component is a real critical factor of where the data is going to be. So it was pretty interesting. I was virtual because of some situations at home with a new baby, but I tried to attend as many of these conferences virtually. I don't think we get as much out of it virtually as we do when we're there. It's just such a different factor. There's some new enhancements on the data cloud, which is a big component for them, dealing with commerce as well that they unveiled. But I'm looking forward to attending some functions next week. But your perspectives as well on Salesforce?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot. I mean, what I would say is that I sat with their investor analyst meeting last night, and I put out some stuff on it on LinkedIn and Twitter today, or X, I guess. But the point, I think the point that I was I think there was a point that I was trying to drive home, which is they believe very firmly that their data set and all the data and transactions that they produce is going to be instrumental in a successful application and usage for customers on AI. They touted their data cloud quite a bit and how it integrates with multiple clouds. So I think they too are telling a similar story. The only thing that gave me any caution was they didn't raise their revenue projections, but they raised their EBITDA projections. And when I look at AI, the first thing that I think of is it's expensive. So, are they going to be able to deliver and execute upon this vision that they have, right? Are they going to be able to do it, or are they going to need more money to do it than they might think? So, but nonetheless, yet another technology company that is starting to formulate a real, what I'll call a real strategy around AI beyond just kind of, hey, this is cool tech. This is actually how it's going to apply and impact their individual product lines. So, a lot to dig into and look at that down the road.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I think that, having the real AI strategy and also the monetization strategy, as you mentioned, like how do you get this done? I think also really being able to use data very specifically for customer experiences. And that was a really big focus from what I saw. I wasn't able to attend all of the sessions, but from what I saw from Salesforce Connections was on kind of the marketing and commerce stuff, that it's really all about using that data to drive better customer experiences. And
just on that note, don't you both think like we have all these data clouds to get the data right, the implementation of those, the change management around that is an intense function. And I don't think a lot of these companies aren't really addressing that. So looking at where the data sits, where it needs to go, getting that right to actually work properly, I don't think is necessarily being addressed the way it needs to. But Salesforce is one of those with their data cloud and getting getting the data right so it could be used in the functions that they're proclaiming it.
So let me give you a micro anecdote on that. Right now, I'm actually about 2/3 of the way through a data science and machine learning course that I'm taking in my spare time with MIT. And every lab and every week we get a new lab to do. And I can tell you right now that probably about 50% of the time is not doing machine learning. Actually, it's the minority of the time. The majority of the time we spend in the labs is data preparation. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I do think that there is a situation now where you've got people talking about the end stuff, right? And it's almost like going into a house and buying it because the cabinets look cool, right? Well, what about the heating system? What about the floors? Is the roof okay? All that stuff is important too. So I do think you're absolutely right that people aren't necessarily accounting for it, or customers as they get this feature set aren't going to necessarily be able to kind of glide into the on ramp of it because their data might not be good.
Right. It's a great subject. We might have to have a podcast just on that, but anyway.
All right. Well, let's move on to Zoom Perspectives. So I was in New York at Zoom Perspectives, and speaking of Zoom, I wish that everybody had the noise cancellation. As you heard a few minutes ago, the dog was barking. And if we were on Zoom, you would not have heard that dog barking. So the noise cancellation on Zoom is actually quite extraordinary. So Zoom Perspectives is an analyst event, and we just got a really good view of what Zoom is really focusing on. Kind of their sort of next expansion, I would say. Zoom is so known for video, and they have so many other things beyond video, including contact center and like a Zoom phone, their Zoom workplace. Like there's so many things that I think people don't know Zoom for, but actually if people use more, what they find is that if people use 2 or 3 of their products, it's a lot more sticky for them. So that's really kind of where their focus is right now, is getting people to kind of use more of the products. Big focus on the contact center. They're doing a great job with kind of disrupting these on-prem contact centers. Their AI, they're not playing around with AI. So I actually, asked some questions from them about AI, because they're not just, first of all, they have their AI meeting summaries, and they're, they do have this kind of revenue accelerator AI, which they do charge for, but most of the AI is no additional charge. So they're really getting people to actually use their AI, but they have a very, very solid team of people who are leading AI. Just brought over another new person from Microsoft. So they're very serious about what they're doing with AI. And I think that they're planning to compete in this space. Like, it's not just like, oh, we can give you a meeting summary. They're really kind of digging into how they can add in like sentiment analysis and employee engagement and agent health and those types of things. So I think that they really have, a space to compete there. They also have recently, last year they acquired WorkVivo, which is an employee engagement platform. Meta just sunsetted their employee engagement platform and named WorkVivo as their sole preferred migration partner. So all of the, Facebook for work people will now be migrating, hopefully, to WorkVivo. I mean, obviously they can choose another provider, but it's going to be a lot easier for them if they go through WorkVivo. So in general, I think Zoom Perspectives was a really good opportunity to kind of dig deeper into what they have coming up. There were some things that we didn't talk about, which I was somewhat surprised about, kind of on the security front. You know, I know their security posture. I know what they've done, you know, in terms of how they treat privacy and security. But after Zoom Perspectives, just on Twitter X, I saw that they're like quantum prepared. And I'm like, wait, where is this coming from? I mean, it was kind of like that you know, that they're really going for it with that. So, um, you know, in general, it was a really great event. One of the best parts of it, just personally, but also just from a really interesting technology standpoint, was we got to go to the MLB headquarters, their technology center, and see
That's
not
cool.
just Zoom replay center where they, like, if you have a call on any field throughout the country, they send it back to New York and the umpires review it there. And Zoom powers that, but we got to see all of the technology. It was so cool, you guys. Like, they have these rooms where they just have monitors all over you. They have temperatures of all of the, like, the racks throughout every single park. They have like the health of each of all the things happening in all the
That's
parks.
cool.
Rooms where they're broadcasting everything. It was really cool. The amount of technology that it takes to run the operations of MLB is amazing. And it was so interesting to see that and to see how much a part of it Zoom participates in. So that was really cool to see. I'm a big baseball fan. Two of my boys play baseball. So that was very, very
Cool.
interesting to see. You guys are Zoom users. Any questions you have about what's going on with the company? Any thoughts, feelings?
Not me particularly. I mean,
I don't want to put you on the spot.
I'm in the camp of, hey, the video conferencing works great. I guess I have to go learn more, right? I guess that's where I am. I'm at the basic level of education, unfortunately.
It's
Yeah,
cool how they're using data and how the Zoom and MLB, and I mean it's changing sports. You know, all this data and how it's accumulated, and especially how the instant replay is being used and sponsoring, you know, MLB, and you know, you seen it firsthand. It's probably just one of the coolest things. So,
it's very
look,
cool.
yeah, glad you had a good time. Fun.
Very cool. All right, on to the next thing. So I went from New York across the country to Los Angeles for Canva's first US analyst. Well, actually, their first event, US event. It wasn't just for analysts. Analysts were actually a very small part of the event. It was customers, users. So Canva is making a very big push into the enterprise. And I think there's an interesting position here for Canva because I feel like Gen Z has grown up on Canva. Canva is very smart in that they give it away in education and nonprofits. So people are very used to using Canva. It's very easy to use compared to what I think, you know, a lot of people consider some Adobe products to be more complicated.
Mhm.
They're built for like real creatives, right? It's not just like, oh, I need to create this real quick graphic. So a lot of people are very familiar with Canva. But typically it's been small teams, it's individual users. Now they're doing this big enterprise push. I think so. They've done a recent acquisition that I think pushes them a little over the edge from being, I would say, like almost cutesy Canva-y to a little bit more serious design elements. But I think they definitely have, you know, it's hard to compete with Adobe when you're talking about real serious creatives. They're making a big push there, and I think that they're, you know, I posted something on LinkedIn. I think that there's a very nice sliver that they've carved out where they have kind of the Canva users that have sort of matured enough or advanced enough that they want those kind of more advanced features that sits in between the Adobe users that are sort of a little too creative elitist and want more controls, because a lot of the things within Canva are templates. They have a lot more coming. They showed us roadmap stuff that there will be stuff that is much more custom coming down the road, but most of it is built in templates. And so there is this really nice, I think, sliver that they've carved out in the enterprise that users in like finance, HR, very specific users that aren't even marketing groups, but that aren't the creative types are going to, this is sort of a sweet spot for them, if that makes sense. They did get a little bit of criticism on Twitter over the weekend for some singing and dancing that they did on stage about security. And, they rapped about security. I was there, and it wasn't as
Probably
like
fun.
it was fun. It was fine. They took it seriously. It wasn't as what people on Twitter were calling cringe. So it didn't tank in person the way that I think people were saying online, at least on X, Twitter, because they talked about it. This was sort of just a skit. They do have a very serious security posture, and I think I liked their leadership team. I liked being able to hear kind of the vision for the future. I would like to see a little bit more data analytics about the performance of content without having to go to, say, an Adobe to track content, or to use like social media platform to track the performance of content. But other than that, I think that it was a really nice event, very well put on, and like I said, I think they've carved a little space for themselves. Definitely, there's some users of a certain generation that are just going to immediately gravitate towards that. And we talked about bring your own AI. I'm sure, 100% sure, that there are people who are bringing their own creative tools to work, and I would guess that Canva is at the top of that list.
It's easy to use. It's a newer software. It's different than PowerPoint or Adobe. It's a different breed. I think like you said, it's a niche that they have, that they've carved out. It's simple. It's what you see is what you get. It's one of those new software packages. I like it.
I used it to make the header on the last post that just went up for me today.
Excellent.
There you go.
So I brought my own Canva. Yes.
Yes.
Got it.
BYOC.
I love
Me
that
too.
tool. I'm a big fan. So yeah. Yep.
Great. All right. Well, we're totally over time here. So let's talk quickly about what's coming up. I'm off to Cisco Live on Monday, and then I will be back here in Austin for Zoholics, where Robert will be joining. And what about you guys? What you got coming up?
Yeah, I'll be at SAP Sapphire Sunday through Tuesday, then the Zoho. But what's interesting about SAP is really want to see what the ERP industry is up to. SAP said in their earnings that it's going to be some of the best next 5 years of for the ERP, is the growth that's fueling the data for all these applications. We're going to see how they're migrating the data to all these applications, who their primary ecosystem partners are going to be, and how AI is driven through their whole platform. So I'm excited about that. And then joining you at Zoho and in Austin, and it should be a really good week.
Yeah, good stuff. And Jason,
I'm going to take a short vacation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have anything. All right.
And I don't have any shows lined up, but I have a pretty full research agenda coming down the pike in the next couple of months. So I'm sure there'll be more shows, but for now I'm going to go a little bit deeper.
Excellent. Well, enjoy your vacation, and when you get back, we'll do another pod and we'll talk about all the things going on. Sorry, we went a little bit long here. We're not like Pat and Dan who can do 5 minutes. We gotta practice that. But for all of you who joined us, thanks so much for joining us. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. Please also follow us on Twitter, or just hit us up on Twitter or X. We gotta call it X. Let us know what you'd like to hear about. Let us know what you liked, didn't like, whatever you want to talk about next. And we'd love to incorporate that into future shows. And for now, I'm Melody Brue, joined by Robert Kramer and Jason Andersen, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.